I'm talking with Stephen Barlow from Fellowship of Reconciliation, the Fire Mountain chapter in Chehalis, and I'd like to ask what brings you to this Ground Zero retreat on nuclear issues.
Well, I haven't been here for quite some time, but years ago I was here, and I know Jim and Shelley Douglas, and I was remarking earlier I used to work for State Senator King Lyson, and he himself came out here and spoke to the group. And then later we did something in the Washington State Legislature. We introduced a resolution. It was about the nuclear freeze. So I was speaking earlier about how things are interconnected and how I was his aide and he ended up having a hearing on this very issue. So it's all kind of tied together.
And what are some of the current issues for anti-nuclear activists and peace activists?
Well, that's part of why we're here to find out. I myself am pretty much focused on militarism per se. I used to work at the Pentagon back in the Vietnam War. You know, the CIA, right? Central. I was with DI, Defense Intelligence Agency, and worked on Cambodia part of my time there. So my big issue over the years since I began to realize, you know, what I was a part of is trying to work for nonviolence and disarmament, trying to find make sure the means are consistent with the ends, you know, that we use nonviolent means that fit together with the ends we want to achieve. So, and I'm frankly, I'm want to take on the whole thing. I think militarism, the whole thing is wrong. It's based on a false premise. But I am interested in this particular issue as well, the Trident.
What kind of work did you do with the DIA, and when did you come a point of turning away from that?
Well, I was there after Georgetown University. I got my master's degree in international relations, and I went right to work for DIA. And that was about 65 to 69, right, during the Vietnam War. And I quit more for personal reasons, but then gradually over a period of years, I traveled in Europe, and I began to rethink a lot of things. So, I mean, I could give you some of the steps along the way, but it was a gradual process, and I came to the point where I realized that I was a part of something that was essentially evil, and now I'm trying to spend the rest of my life doing something positive.
What are some of the things that you've done or your organization has done to try and work against the militarization?
Well, I myself, when I was living on Queen Anne, was part of a group. There were a number of people that tried to and succeeded in stopping the Navy from basing its task force in Elliott Bay. And then I did go to Everett to try to warn them, you know, say they're coming.
When was this?
Let's see. I think that must have been in the early 80s, and I tried to help to alert them and say I'd be willing to help, but they wanted to fight their battle, and of course the military shoved that thing down their throats. But what other issues? You know, the white train and so on. I was a little bit involved in that, and the whole issue of defense conversion, if you're familiar with that, economic conversion, converting from a war base to a peace-based economy. So, and that kind of work, I first became involved with that back in the late 70s, early 80s, and we were way ahead of our time, you know. Still very relevant, but the elected officials aren't thinking that way.
How optimistic are you about such a conversion away from the military complex?
Well, I think, you know, the craziness seemed to reach a peak during the 80s. I wrote a piece for Senator Lyson, was called From Mad to Nuts. Are we going beyond sanity? It was, you know, mad, mutually assured destruction. Nuts was nuclear utilization, target selection, the first strike capability. And as I see in our discussions today, we're still pressing along on that track. But there are signs that people, you know, the Cold War is over, and the budget crunch is on, so there'll be pressure from that standpoint. The consciousness is changing a bit. So I'm hopeful that, you know, we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I'm hopeful that possibly we have reached or are reaching a turning point.
And what is your impression of the general public's awareness of nuclear issues presently?
Well, pretty much asleep, I guess, aren't they? You know, and Noam Chomsky talks about that, about roughly 80% of the people are kind of out of the issue. And I don't mean to be patronizing here, but, you know, they're busy with jobs and families and other things. And plus the government and the press don't help too much to enlighten them either, do they?
What role specifically do you think the media has in public's awareness of what's going on?
What ought they to have, or what do they have?
What do they have right now?
Well, now they're, you see some signs of what I would consider proper reporting. I mean, we get some. At least they'll print letters to the editor in the PI and the Times occasionally. Sometimes you'll see a decent editorial. Where I am down in the Twin Cities, there we have the Chronicle. It's very conservative. Although whenever I have a letter to be published, they'll put it in. If I want to address School of the Americas or Hiroshima, Nagasaki, or militarism in general, they'll put it in. But generally speaking, I mean, what is this about the liberal press? I mean, it's owned by the big corporations, so they want to maintain the status quo, don't they?
Do you have any specific steps in mind that our society needs to take in order to move in a direction away from militarization?
I think it's a complete reordering of national priorities. I mean, we're too militaristic and we're too materialistic, and those two go together. We consume a lot, and we need more bigger military, and need to consume more oil to keep the whole thing going. So to me, it's essentially, if you really want to get down to the rock bottom issue, it's a spiritual thing. I believe. We're going to have to come to some kind of terms with our own spirituality and what we're all about. I mean, not necessarily. I happen to be raised as a Christian, but not saying to push one particular religion, but to say that the best, the best elements of spirituality in the various religions, and which is to say, how do we treat one another? Are we one community? Is humanity one? Are we just separate tribes constantly warring against each other, and are we going to be that way forever? I don't think we are. I think we're ready to move on to the next level.
What kind of issues are specific to your area in Chehalis?
Oh, we have some pretty serious problems down there with illiteracy. There's a lot of problems of young unwed mothers down there, lack of education. We have some environmental problems. You've heard about the steam plant down there, but now they're going to try and clean that up a little bit.
What is it with the steam plant?
Well, it was causing major pollution problems, but they cut a deal in the legislature about the company has agreed to put scrubbers on. They've given a certain amount of time to do it, and the money. They're getting a big bundle of money. Don't ask me for the exact figure. It escapes me right now, but a big chunk of money to effect this plan, and it's supposed to be a win-win situation for the workers and for the environment. So we're keeping our eyes on that too. But let's see, other than those issues, I mean, the issues, we're in our long-term planning phase right now, and that's one thing we want to do is brainstorm on getting all the issues out that we want to work on. And we're a multi-issue group down there in FOR, and we want to prioritize them. But it's we have our local issues, we have our national, we have our international issues. We want to see how to tie these together, and it's very hard to find a common thread, But for me, a lot of it has to do with militarism and misspent money and misplaced priorities. I'd like to see those change. I personally feel that we have an empire and a republic, and I think the empire is destroying the republic, and that's I constantly harp on that. People are tired of hearing about it, but I'm just afraid that our whole democratic way of life, to the extent that we really had democracy, which was limited, right, is being eroded, and by the very thing that's supposed to save us, militarism. That which is supposed to make us more secure is making us less secure. That which is supposed to save us from our enemies is actually is in the process of destroying us. But I don't know what's going to turn around. Possibly a crash in the stock market. I used to be a stockbroker back in the early 70s, and now when I was a broker, the market was at about 1,000, on the Dow. Now it's 8,000. So we're saying, how high can it go? 10,000? And after that, I think maybe it'll take a big shock like that before people really begin to feel it and begin to be open to some major changes in the status quo.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.